Welcome everybody to the AZ Lax Report. I'm your host Brian Patillo, and I'm here today with my co-host Alex Garwood. It's a beautiful Sunday night in Arizona, and we are here to give you the latest and greatest lacrosse content in State 48. As a reminder, we're partnered with BeAGoodHumanCoffee.com. Be a good human, live bravely, and love fiercely. Check out their website for coffee, tea, and merch, where 100% of the profits go to the Fight Like Flow Foundation and support pediatric cancer research. Alex, we are halfway through the ALL playoffs, and we're going to get to all the action first. I know you've been a busy man this weekend, but how are you doing today? How has your Sunday been?
It's been great. I definitely wanted to use today to recover. Did some grocery shopping, swapped out some propane tanks for, barbecue season is upon us. So just trying to get everything ready.
Yeah, there you go. That's nice. Looking forward to a little barbecue over there, maybe some more whiskey tasting when we get done with this season here. So I'll be counting on that there. Well, we know you've been busy because, as I mentioned in the intro, we are in the middle of the ALL playoffs. The playoffs, we had our preview last weekend. They kicked off this past week with the first round on Tuesday, April 23rd. We're going to get to the scores in a second there. We had the quarterfinals Friday and Saturday because of some weather issues, another thing we'll talk about. And then we're going to have the semifinal games on Tuesday night of this week. If you're hearing this episode, it's either going to be, well, it'll probably be posted tonight, so you'll hear it on Tuesday if you're listening on Sunday or Monday morning. And then the championship game will be Friday. So we wanted to do it a little bit different for this episode. I'm going to kind of explain a bit more once we get to the end. But let's jump into the playoffs and talk about what happened this week and go over the first round games. So, as we mentioned, the first round started on Tuesday, April 23rd. The top four teams had a bye, so we had the remaining teams in a matchup to make it to the quarterfinals. Let's start out. We had Boulder Creek with a strong victory over Corona, 13-3. In our coaching interview, we're going to have Coach PJ Rovinelli on later. He's going to give you a little more detail about this game. But just looking at the box score here, we had 6 points from Clancy Brocious, 5 from Cash Jones, and goalie Kyle Kelly, 9 saves on 12 shots, shutting down that offense of the Aztecs for that first round victory for Boulder Creek. Moving on, we had Scottsdale in a close one, beating Oro Valley 12-11. 4 goals and 1 assist for Harry Gurash, 5 goals for Will Elfline. They carried the offense in that close battle. Henrik Norig and Nate Snavely with 5 points each in the defeat for Oro Valley. Good matchup there. Exciting to see the playoffs get started like that. What else do you got for us, Alex?
Yeah, Arcadia also played Brophy V2, won 10-4. Really close first quarter with Brophy V2. It was 3-2 after one, but following 5 points for Luke Mellon and that defensive unit led by goalie Gavin Fuller, they held Brophy V2 to just 1 goal for the rest of the game to win on that one 10-4. Next, this was a game that I was watching pretty closely because I know that we were going to play the winner. It was Desert Vista playing Higley. DV won 16-8. Very balanced offense for DV in that game. Kyle Lynch led the way, 5 points. Levi Shoemaker also had 5 goals, plus 4 points each for Alex Rodriguez and Wilson Gray. Diggy 14 saves in the win there, while Sam Verpalot for Higley saw a lot of rubber, putting up 17 saves in that loss. So, it's always tough. 17 saves. I can't imagine how many shots that Sam saw in that game. So credit to him there for keeping his team in it. Quarterfinals Friday and Saturday did have some major weather issues, except for the Brophy game. So Brian, why don't you tell us about that one? Since I guess it was really nice.
Yeah, the 2 games that avoided weather. First was Brophy, really dominating victory over Scottsdale High School, 19-9. And really just want to shout out, I've mentioned it before, but just strong showing by the senior laden Brophy team, they've made a lot of history so far, and they're on this run seeking for their third state championship in a row, and playing in 4 games will be the goal there. Laird Miller led the way, 7 points, and the whole defensive unit, Charlie McGinnis, Noah Burdick, Tal Baldiga, Connor Rassis, really just contributing a stout effort in net there. I was really impressed with the compete level of the Scottsdale High team. I know they are a younger team, and their seniors that they do have really kind of led the way, and they really fought through right to the end. So congrats on their season there. Hopefully brighter future ahead. But Brophy, with a strong win, managing to avoid the lightning storm that was going on the north side of the city. And
we were actually watching that game, and I was watching with your brother actually in his truck, because we had to go back to our cars because of the lightning. So we had the stream on. I was impressed with both of the face-off men on with Berman and with Dion. They had a good night battling there at the X. So basically, any time those two were facing off, I kind of held up the phone and I'm like, "Hey, it's another face-off," and we got to watch those two go at it. So it was a good time.
Yeah, 2 of the top guys in the state, and really good competitors there. It was a good matchup, and like I said, I hope for some good things from Scottsdale. I have to say that Harry Gurash, as a lefty shooter, he can. If I'm a kid trying to watch somebody shoot, he has one of the fastest releases. It was quite impressive with the goals that he had in that game, how fast he can let that ball rip. He hides it well, and he puts a lot of velocity on it really quickly, and that makes it really difficult to stop as a goalie. So any kids watching at home, go watch that stream, and he's not a bad shooter to emulate there. Moving on, we also had our other quarterfinal game that was going on the south end of the city. Perry with a close victory over Arcadia, 7-6. We also are going to have Dustin Cowell on later, so he'll tell you a little bit more about that close battle in detail and some of the good performances there.
Awesome. NDP with a strong showing, winning against Boulder Creek 12-2. 7 points for Ethan Reno, 5 goals, 5 for Caden Wright, kind of leading that offense, while goalie Luke Lamont stopped 14 shots out of 16, really kind of backstopping the defense there.
Yeah, and that was one that had to get rescheduled because of that lightning. And your game, you had a really big win. We previewed it last week. You take on Desert Vista. You had beaten them twice earlier in the season, really close games, and this one looked like it lived up to the billing, with your team getting a victory over DV 7-6. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that game and what was going on in it?
Yeah, so the preparation for that game is definitely tough. It's really hard to beat any team 3 times in a single season. By the third game, it's the defense knows the offensive tendencies, and vice versa there. So it's 2 teams that know each other very well, and it's even harder to beat a team that is that made it to the quarterfinals of the state playoffs, right? So definitely a tough matchup for anybody, right? But we started. We actually started the game. So NDP, I guess the storm must have been worse over where they were at, because we thought we may be able to miss it. So we started the game, actually. The game ended with 3 minutes and 22 seconds left in the second quarter, and we were down 1-4. And we were told to go back to our cars, and it was 11 o'clock at night before the trainers and refs finally just called it. There was a city ordinance for lights that they were going to shut off, and we were going to kind of keep them going anyways, and we weren't going to be able to finish the game before midnight, so we just kind of agreed to call it for the night and find some alternative fields. And as everyone knows, our field issues are kind of notorious at this point, so we're kind of looking at 3 to 4 different options for Saturday, trying to find a field. We ended up being able to get our normal stadium field, which is fantastic. So a huge thanks to kind of our board and the refs and DV and everyone involved to help coordinate a time to get those boys a game and let them play, because both teams also had prom that night too. So it wasn't just us, it was DV also. So we need to have this game early enough to get those guys to be able to go back out and enjoy their prom and everything. So there was a lot of just everything to that game, and this is the first game that I've coached that we're down 3 before the whistle. You always kind of joke, score 0-0, but in this time it's like, no, like we're in a hole and we really need to dig. And if yesterday was a single game, we won 6-2 and ended up only winning by 1 because we really dug ourselves in a hole Friday night. So thankful we were able to finish that game, and got a tough win, and just had a film today, just kind of getting ready for NDP on Tuesday.
Yeah, and that's congrats to you and the team there for gutting out a victory in that circumstances. Definitely challenging to kind of handle the emotions and the ups and the downs, and as you said, kind of going into that really knowing you've got about a half to play and you've got a deficit already is certainly an interesting perspective when you get into it. But congrats again, on behalf of the podcast, and getting to the semifinals. So, without further ado, that brings us to the semifinal matchup. So we will have Brophy taking on Perry. This is a rematch of last year's state championship, as well as, they've played some other games before that. Obviously, they've had some back and forth. Brophy did defeat them twice earlier this season. We'll see if Perry has any tricks up their sleeve or adjustments to their game plan or what they're going to bring to the table. And your Pioneers will take on NDP. So that will be a big matchup there. Now, before I get into the details of what we got for the rest of this podcast, and I know you don't want to give too much away, Alex, you're still game planning and getting ready, but do you have any just kind of high-level comments about your preparation for NDP in the semifinals?
I mean, NDP is a really good team, kind of top to bottom. They're very similar to us in a sense of both have a good goalie, really solid LSM, a strong attack unit, fast athletic midfielders. Should be a pretty good game. I mean, both Pinnacle and NDP are kind of peaking at the right time. I'm hoping for a good game, and to your point, I don't want to give away too many secrets here, but I'm excited. I'm excited. It's playoff lacrosse, right? Excited to have one guaranteed practice right tomorrow with the team, and kind of get our last minute preparations in for a semifinal matchup on Tuesday.
Yeah, and for everybody listening, the semifinals and the championship will be carried by APN Video. You could find APN Video on YouTube. You could find links for the live streams. We'll try to put them out before the games on our Instagram page. Of course, I do the Brophy games with APN Video. Jeff Lowry over there runs a good business there, puts on a really good presentation, and we will be doing both semifinal games. From the league standpoint, broadcasting those. I'll be announcing or doing the color commentary for the Brophy game again, so I'll get that semifinal, but you will have somebody doing the game with you over there, Alex, so if anybody wants to watch that, they'll be able to catch that on APN Video, and then the championship game, whoever is in that, I'll be a part of that broadcast as well, so same thing, you can check that out on YouTube for that Friday night game if you can't make it to the field and see it there in person. So exciting to be a lacrosse fan now. You got a lot of options to see what should be some good games and a thrilling finish here to the ALL playoffs. Now, let me explain to everybody what we've got here for the rest of the podcast. So Alex is obviously busy game planning and getting ready himself for the semifinal game and all of the prep that goes along with that. We wanted to give everybody, all of our listeners, a little bit of a different perspective, really for maybe some of the younger players who are listening or parents who are listening and don't necessarily get to peek behind the curtain at some of the conversations that happen on the strategy and X's and O's side with coaches. So in our next half of really the majority of the podcast, because I end up talking to these guys for a little over an hour. We brought on Dustin Cowell, head coach of Arcadia, and PJ Rovinelli, head coach at Corona. Both have been guests previously, kind of talking about their programs and their experiences. We bring them on and we talk about these semifinal matchups from a real game planning, X's and O's perspective. We talk about some of the things on offense, player matchups, strategy, different things that different coaches might be thinking about going into this game. I thought the conversation went really, really well. We didn't have Alex we didn't have you be a part of it because you're doing your own thing, and we wanted to kind of give a non-biased perspective there. So it's unfortunately, if you don't like hearing just my voice, you're stuck with me and those two coaches for the later part of the interview here, but we really do hope everyone enjoys it, and go ahead and give us some feedback on whether you like that segment, if that's something you want more of, or if you didn't like it and it's not something you want. We're definitely open to that feedback, particularly as we get ready for what'll be, I guess, our last ALL episode next weekend. So it's been
wow.
It's been a quick run. Yeah, it feels like it just started, but we'll get one more kind of postseason wrap-up episode in, and we'll talk about whoever ends up winning that championship. And Alex, we hope it's you from the podcast standpoint. So
that's right.
Good luck in your semifinal game, and hopefully another one after that. Anything else to add before we wrap it up here?
Yeah, I was wondering if anybody still had a perfect bracket.
Oh yeah, I actually I have to check. Let me see if I can get it up here really quick. I should.
Yeah, I'm just curious. Yeah,
would have been good for some prep here if I had done this. But let's go to the standings here. Let's see. We have got. Oh, I've got to update it. That's the problem. Here we go. See, it's been a long weekend for me here, so let's get this going. Let's get this set up here, and let's do this here. We have got master bracket, and we've got Brophy, Perry, Pinnacle, and NDP. We'll save that, and let's see what the update is here. All right, we have we've got 3 entries actually. We'll withhold the names, but 3 entries with a perfect bracket so far.
Wow.
All picked correct. Cody, my brother, his picks, he's in 4th place. He has 1 wrong. He's 11-1. So we have 3 players.
I think he had Corona, right? That was his one.
Yeah. So we'll see how those 3 bracket picks go. We'll talk about that after, maybe do a little Instagram update as we get into the semis, because we'll have to see what they have, and if it comes down to that tiebreaker in that championship game. So pretty good to see. We got a couple people making some good picks there, doing better than me. I'm 9-3, so not doing great.
Yeah, I didn't put a bracket together, but I think it'd be pretty good right now.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, that was a good reminder to check in on that. And as I said, I hope everyone enjoys the rest of the podcast here. And Alex, on behalf of the podcast and all the listeners who may not have a dog in the fight going into these semifinals, we'll wish you good luck in your game Tuesday, and looking forward to talking with you after about it.
Yeah, I'll take all the luck, all the thoughts, prayers, whatever you guys wanna send our way. I'll take it.
All right, sounds good. All right, everybody, enjoy our Final Four coaches preview coming up next here. All right, welcome everybody to a special interview portion of the show. We've got on 2 former guests, current coaches in the ALL. And we wanted to bring them on to preview the Final Four. And I'm going to introduce them here in a moment. And we want everybody to get a sense of kind of some of the behind the scenes stuff that goes on into lacrosse and game when it comes to strategy, X's and O's, and give a little bit of a different perspective than we have in some of our other conversations. And maybe for some people who are newer to the game, younger players who are starting out, or parents who don't necessarily know a lot about the strategy and the philosophy behind some of the X's and O's and how you game plan for certain things, we think this will be a pretty cool perspective, kind of peek behind the curtain and see what that's like as we preview the Final Four of the ALL. First, let's welcome to the show, former guest, current head coach of Arcadia, Dustin Cowell. Coach, how are you doing today?
I'm good, Bryan. How are you doing?
Good. Now, I know you had a tough final playoff game there, falling at the end of the game there, 1-goal deficit. You want to just quickly tell us a little bit about that and maybe any shout out to your players as your season ended?
Yeah. I mean, it was kind of the matchup that I think everybody was expecting it to go. I think just from hearing the conversations that a lot of the league was having, and I know you guys obviously touched on it in the last episode, it seemed like, our game was kind of a flip of a coin. And that's exactly how it went. We jumped on them early and, then they kind of fought back. And so it was, both teams exchanging leads throughout the game. It never got more than, 2-goal lead for either team. And so just came down to the wire. We unfortunately had a couple, close shots that, Aiden Schuyler just made some unbelievable saves, and a couple bounces went their way. And, we just missed those opportunities. And so, I have to tip my hat to Perry. They played an unbelievable game, and, Shane Wellesley, really dominated the faceoffs and gave Jordan some fits. And it just kind of came down to some of the stuff in between the lines. But overall, it was exactly what you'd expect in a 4-5 matchup. So, super proud of my team and, just the way that we finished our season. Obviously, if we include the out-of-state games, we finished with a 13-3 record and 8-0 in our conference, winning our Desert Sky Conference. And then, just some big shout-outs to, a couple guys, Luke Mellon, who, finished the season over 60 points. And, in my opinion, obviously, being his coach is definitely deserving of a, first team midfielder. And I'm glad that he was able to get some recognition as an all-state player. And other guys like Davis Witherspoon, who was a top 5 player all season, Andrew Nickel, Gavin Fuller, John Coulter, Jordan at the face-off. So there's tons of guys I can give credit to. And, we had an unbelievable season, and I know our guys are super motivated to come back and run it back next year.
Yeah, that's awesome. And we talked about earlier in the season when we interviewed you, you've got a young team, I think of only 2 seniors, right? So
Yep.
Going to have a lot of players coming back and looking forward and excited to see what next season we'll have in store for you. Our other guest for this interview is Coach PJ Rovinelli, the head coach of Corona High School, another former guest of the podcast. Happy to have him back as well. Coach PJ, your team fell in the first round of the playoffs. Welcome to the podcast, and why don't you give us a little conversation around how that game went and your overall thoughts on your team this year.
Yeah, I'm happy to be back, man. Thank you. Always fun to join my buddy Dustin. We talk a lot of shop, so it was a great year. I think I'm proud of our guys. We came into the season just focusing on ourselves, learning how to play the game, and they did a great job. I think we definitely earned some respect in the league. These kids are playing some good lacrosse now, and get to the playoff game and awesome first half against Boulder Creek. We were first quarter, I think we had 10 minutes of possession time, and that's with shots. I'd like to hit the cage a little more, but can't complain about the possession time. 3-2 game at halftime. Their 2 goals were 2 of the 3 goals were kind of busted clears, tough riding, and so we were sticking to the game plan. Elijah Kwan was doing a great job against Clancy. Great matchup there. Tanner in the midfield against Gabe, and so it was looking good. And the last couple of games, we just kind of came out at some point in the game and just had a tough quarter. And so out of halftime, Boulder Creek made some great adjustments. We were able to kind of get our two attackmen, Ben Martinez and Elijah Smith, in the first half, kind of matched up on shorties, taking advantage of that. Both of them had a goal, and they did a good job of keeping personnel and making adjustments. And then we just got, smoked at the face-off X. So, hats off to their face-off guy. I think we won maybe 2 or 3 face-offs all game, and came out and had that tough quarter and weren't able to come back. So kudos to Boulder Creek. They thrive kind of playing fast, and we struggled a little bit in transition defense there, and so ended up being 13-3. But first half was great game, great boxing match. But overall, Grant had a great first half too, with I think 9 or 10 saves. But overall, our season, just proud of them. They I don't think anybody gave them a fighting chance, and that was kind of one of our keys, was just to quiet the noise and focus on us and show the state we can play lacrosse. And so we were in most of our games, we were in tight games, either the one or within a couple points. And so I was super proud of our leaders, and Ben Martinez and Tanner and Cole Bastion and Elijah Smith. So bright future though. We're only losing 4 guys. We lose some critical pieces, but only losing 4 guys, bringing in 20 freshmen. And so I think the future is bright for the Corona Aztecs. But and hats off to Boulder Creek in that second half. But it was fun. We had a good time.
Nice. Well, again, another young team that's coming along. Obviously, your first year in the program there. You're both overall younger coaches in terms of tenures within the program, and I think really doing a great job of establishing kind of a culture and what can hopefully be a really long-lasting success there in the future for both of your programs. So let's get to the fun part here. Now, I know both of you would rather be actually in the lab right now watching film and game planning for a semifinal game in the ALL, and hopefully one day you both will get the opportunity to do that as head coaches with your programs. But for our conversation here, I want you to put yourselves in the shoes of these coaches. I'm going to talk about the matchups, and I want you guys to let me know what are some things that you're thinking, what are players you might be keying on, what might you be doing strategy-wise. I've got a few questions I'll ask. I'll give you my opinion too, and having seen these teams play and some of the matchups and things like that. But let's jump right into it. Let's go with our first semifinal matchup, which is going to be Brophy as the 1 seed taking on Perry. This is a rematch of the state championship game last year. Of course, Perry beat Brophy earlier in the season. Was a very big kind of emotional victory for them. Brophy ends up taking the championship, starting their 2 back-to-back championships, as they now are on a quest for their 3rd. Super impressive Brophy team. I don't think enough can be said about kind of the legacy they've been building these last 3 years here. They're undefeated, obviously, this season in the league, in state competition, as they go into this matchup with Perry. They did beat Perry twice already this season, 16-6 earlier on March 5th, and a little bit more recently on April 12th. They had a 9-1 victory. So let's talk about this matchup first, and let's put ourselves probably in the side of the underdogs here with Perry, trying to come back and get a victory here. There's a lot to talk about, obviously, and they've got a lot of key pieces, and we'll get your opinions overall. I think a lot of people will expect Brophy to be competing for a state championship here, so even in some of this feedback, kind of thinking into next game potentially as well, although of course, there's a reason you play the game and it's not played out on paper, so you never know what can happen. So let's start about the Brophy offense. So we know they are extremely dominant. They put up a lot of shots. They're a volume shooting team. They have threats all over the field. Dustin, let's go with you first. You've played against them. What are you trying to do defensively to slow down the Brophy offense?
Yeah, I mean, I think, obviously first glance at that team, there's a lot of mouths to feed. And so there's a lot of teams in this league that only have the luxury of having, two, three guys, maybe four guys that, you know, you're really focusing on. And if you take one or two of them away, it kind of makes it more of a dogfight. But with these guys, you kind of have to account for all six offensively. But then you got the threat of, Noah Burdick, Connor Rassis, Harrison Yu, and now Billy Eastep in the midfield. So it's in transition. So it's tough to, really focus on one or two, three guys. I think something that we've always had success with in the past is running a zone on them. I think, in the last two seasons between last year and then this year, we've been able to wrinkle in a zone, and it's frustrated them a little bit. It's kind of taken them out of their game plan, and some of those guys that typically aren't used to taking outside shots, have been starting to take and force some outside shots. So I think being able to wrinkle in a zone is something that the Brophy offense, had some fits with when we played them. And I think the other thing that I tell our guys is against a team like that, you have to be able to counter. I think, if you fall into a hole against a team like that with the depth they have, it's very hard to climb back out of it. So it's one of those things where if, they score first, you got to punch back. If they pick up a big ground ball, you got to pick up a big ground ball. You got to push transition on them and put the pressure on them a little bit. So, when we played them earlier this year in the very beginning of the season, we scored the first goal of the game and really had all the momentum, and then it just kind of became a boxing match back and forth. Like I said, we threw that zone at them, which really limited their ability to swing the ball around and have all their playmakers touch the ball. And I think where it kind of got away from us was obviously Dion at the faceoff X and just their depth, man. Like their third line middies could start at most of these schools. So it's like I said, it's kind of really controlling the pace of the game and being able to punch back when they feel like they've got the momentum. So I would say those are some of the keys, that I would be game planning for this game and things that I've done against them. And, obviously they've got a very talented coaching staff as well. So, kind of becomes a chess match with them and trying to match their energy and match their skill sets.
Yeah. And I should have prefaced this actually, obviously, I want to hear your feedback, but I understand if, you've got some secret game plans that you want to kind of keep in your back pocket, as for future. So I appreciate being able to share what you can. And PJ and Dustin, both of you guys, definitely let's, totally casual here. Feel free to chime in and if you agree or disagree or anything with that. And sticking to that offense, that zone concept is something that I think we've seen a few opponents play against them. PJ, what are your thoughts? Are you thinking the same thing? Maybe a zone as a way to kind of slow down that offense?
I mean, yeah, I think even before you get to your defensive strategy, the biggest thing is you got to slow down Dion. Dion's a bad man. You know what I mean? He's gonna create so much offense, and Brophy in transition is incredibly dangerous because they can shoot with Laird on the left-hand side, and then they got all their other guys that they can all finish, right? So Busey and whatnot. So the first thing you got to do is you have to get I wouldn't even focus on winning the face-off. I would just focusing on not letting Dion beat me in transition, right? So we got to get him to win it back, get him to 6-on-6. So like Perry's first objective is to get Brophy to 6-on-6. If you let him get up and down on you, it's going to be a long night, and he can hurt you there at the X. So whether you got to throw a long pole at him or whatever it is, they have a pretty scrappy Fogo, understanding, having some humility, maybe countering early, but just get it to, if you win it back, you win it back. Whatever it is, you just can't let Dion get 6 or 7 fast breaks, right? So get him to 6-on-6. Yeah. Then when you get to the zone, I do agree. And I think that, not just with the zone, but also trying to give them a look, give them a different look, keep them guessing, right? Keep them honest. So going inside and out of a man in a zone is what we had success with, at DV with those guys, especially, in the state finals, was trying to keep throwing wrinkles at him. And Pat's good at that. Pat will come out of timeouts and, he'll throw his zone in. So just keep.
They do that a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, when they come out of a timeout, I'm always ready for a zone.
And I'm going to come back to that, because that's a good point. That's something that we point out a lot on the broadcast when we talk about their defense a bit. So let me pick your guys' brains. Yeah, I know we're giving away all the secrets here, but hey, if you get to the top, then you got to take the shots for everybody.
The big thing with the zone though is like there's traditional kind of 3-3 zones. And I think that a lot of times if you're prepared, those are easier to beat because, you just kind of have to get into those pockets because they do have shooters. Where I'd prefer a zone where you can more of a funnel zone, trying to get them to areas where you can pressure. Because if you just sit back on a soft zone, they're going to pick you apart. So that's where coaches need to understand. And Dustin does a good job of this. It's just because it's a zone doesn't mean you don't pressure, right? Doesn't mean you have man responsibilities. And when you're in a zone, it's really like 60% man, 40% zone. And so if you just sit back, they're going to pick you apart. But you got to pressure them and you got to funnel them. You still got to funnel them to areas and collapse, on the backside. Otherwise, they're just going to – those guys can skip the ball 15 and dunk it on you. So that's the big thing. Those two big things are definitely slow the ball down. And if you're going to zone – you got to keep them honest. You can't just sit back and let them pepper Aiden.
Yeah, and you read my mind on what my follow-up question was going to be because, again, for people who are listening, maybe not knowing some of the intricacies of strategy, when we say zone defense, and I try to point this out a little bit when I do the broadcast for games, zone's a concept, but there's different types of zone defenses you can do, right? You mentioned kind of a 3-3 where you basically have your 6 players each occupying a space, and you're constantly kind of passing players through and rotating around. There's some other variations that are kind of hybrid where in certain areas you're playing man, like maybe behind the cage, and in front you're playing zone, or kind of some teams will do like a backer zone type situation where you're trying to get them to dodge a certain way and you have a slide ready to go, and that helps you when you kind of have some of those aggressive offenses. So, if you're out there, you've got, maybe you don't even have a one put in, but if you're thinking, let's put a wrinkle in here, Dustin, I guess both of you guys, are you doing a little bit more of kind of like that backer zone or that 3-3 zone, or you're kind of just dependent on what your team's got available?
Yeah, I mean, I think for us specifically, we've kind of mixed it in between, kind of like PJ mentioned, it'll be a softer zone with teams that we know are going to try and settle it down. If they just played a long possession, they're going to swing the ball around and try and kill some time. It might be a softer zone, or maybe, teams that we know don't have the strongest outside shooters and they're much more of an inside team. So we'll mix that in, but I think it is definitely more of a press up where it's kind of that we have that spy where, we're pinching up top, we're getting on the hands as they skip, again, a team like Brophy with a guy like Eric Wolfson, Josh Busey, guys that can let it fly from 12 to 15, even 20. You gotta make sure that you're getting up on the hands. You can't just let them sit there. And the other thing too is you gotta, that middle guy, if you're in that 3-3's got to help pinch, especially if they try to, maybe fake you down the alley and roll back to the top. You can't just sit there and let them and take that rip. So it's kind of a mixture of the two, but you definitely have to make sure against a team like that you're getting on their hands and applying pressure and making sure that, everybody's communicating, because that's the difficult part about a zone too, is you got to make sure that you're communicating when it's the right time to pass it off, when it's the right time to move and rotate and communicate and call cutters. And, that's where a team like Growth can really pick you apart if you're not communicating and moving in the right direction.
Yeah.
I'm more of a
go. Yeah, go ahead, PJ.
No, I'm more of I'm a backer zone guy. I'm more of a pressure zone. I want to funnel them places, and so I call it controlled chaos. So where I'll put wrinkles in our zone is personnel. So sometimes I'll throw poles on the wings, they're low, or shorties low, and it's kind of to match up either their offense or their strengths. So I can maybe stack poles on one side and D middies on the other. So we're more moving around the personnel, but we're gonna definitely funnel them, send that backer. We got a great backer in Elijah Kwan. And so we're gonna double team at all these different seams, and it's controlled chaos. Where you're seeing shots from like probably 12 to 14, and they're a little more erratic because they're not used to seeing a backer fly at them. So it's kind of a quick shot to get it out of your stick. So I've always had more success in that backer zone, just because if you sit in a 3-3 zone, a lot of times you can just kill it by just going to a 1-4-1, and kind of
flood it out, flood an area of the zone, and I talk about that on the broadcast. You guys both kind of mentioned it. I like to call them zone busters. They've got a couple zone busters on their team that can pull you out of that when they can shoot from 15 yards and score. Because they've got guys with some dangerous shots there. And obviously one of the key parts of playing zone defense could be your goalie play. And for Perry, Aiden Schuyler, Aiden Schuyler, talented goalie, one of the best ones in the league. Obviously going to have a big game for them in this. But is it, when you're playing zone, it's so, I'll speak from a goalie standpoint, PJ, obviously, from a goalie standpoint, like you can't run zone unless you have a talented goalie back there. You need somebody who's going to be able to consistently make those saves, and Aiden can do that. And I think one thing with the Brophy offense is they're volume shooters, right? They're going to put up a lot of shots, and sometimes I think the one thing that can be a little bit of a kryptonite to them is when you get when you slow them down offensively enough, and you pair that with a really good goalie who can maybe frustrate some of those shots that they're used to going in, they don't go in, then that might be the one way you can kind of get to them a little bit on that offensive side. One last kind of thought on the Brophy offense in terms of player matchup. So I think the three big players for Brophy, if you're defending against them, you're looking at number 22, Eric Volson, number 26, Josh Busey, and number 4, Laird Miller. And that's not to take away from the rest of their players. I think you both mentioned their depth is part of the challenge. Now, I've watched them a lot, and they don't really have like a key like ex-attackman that's kind of running the offense kind of solely through one player, right? They sort of attack, I think, a little bit more from the midfield with some other wrinkles. They invert a lot, which is something that you've got to be able to defend against. So you don't necessarily have the option of saying, well, if we shut this guy down, or maybe we throw a face guard out there and try to do a wrinkle or something, because they can attack you in so many ways. So when you're thinking of matchups here, what are your thoughts on how you shut down, or at least try to slow down, the big three scorers that they have there that, at least I think in league play, I think they're all around 30 goals each in Eric, Josh, and Laird? Either of you. I know it's a hard question. It's tough to do.
No, definitely it is. Yeah. Right? Dustin and I have had many of late night conversations about this, right? So the big thing, obviously, Eric's a beast, right? He's got size, he's got speed. You're gonna pull him. And what I tell guys going into those types of matchups is like it's okay for them to have 3-4 points. They just can't have 7.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what you have to go in with that mindset. Because some of these kids, even take it back a layer. Most teams lose to Brophy in the parking lot, right? And
so I think you got a good point there.
The key to winning, beating Brophy is, one, just not being afraid of them, and because you can't lose the game in the parking lot. And then when you get on the game, is just playing it freely. And your matchups is knowing, like, hey, listen, it's different to tell a defenseman you got to shut down Eric versus, hey, let's keep him to 3 points, right? And so understanding the psychology of that, and understanding, players are going to play, right? Eric's going to get his points. Busey, Laird, they're going to get their points. You just got to keep them to 2 or 3 points. You can't let them pop off for 5 or 6, right? And so, you're definitely going to pull there. I'm not sure where Dustin's at. If I look at the next guy, I'm probably actually putting my best close pull on Busey instead of Laird. Laird's obviously experienced. He's great, phenomenal lefty, and when you got a lefty like that, it makes things challenging. he likes to kind of weave dodge off of that 2-3-1 look coming over the top. So if you get a sound defenseman that like, hey, you take away top side, if he beats you, beat him underneath. But Busey, I feel like when he gets the ball quickly on the backside, he's pretty dangerous. He's got great change of direction. So I'm going to probably put my stronger pull on him, and then just try to contain him, right? And it's one of those things where it's like, dude, we don't need a takeaway. Like just stay on his gloves type thing, right? And do that. And so with, if I'm Perry and when I'm scheming for theirs, like you want to keep that game close because they like to score, right? The Brophy likes to score, they like to shoot. So if you can keep a quiet first quarter and a second quarter, my experience is they start shooting because they want to score, right? So you got to keep the game a little closer earlier, and then they'll start taking some undisciplined shots, from my observation. And so, but matchups, you got tough matchups. It's knowing that you got to say the right things to the defenseman and say keep them to 2 or 3. Don't and have your schemes ready for their tendencies.
Yeah, you got anything to add to that, Dustin?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that too. I would say Busey is the guy that scares me a little more. Again, Laird's obviously a great player and just as dangerous, but I think Busey with his, like PJ said, his change of direction, his hand speed is second to none. I've seen him let go of shots with guys in his gloves and rip them top right that I've never seen before. So it's, I'd rather have that kind of more physical bruiser pole that's very tactical that can be on Busey to kind of disrupt him and get him off his game a little bit. And, looking on the Perry side, I think, Nate LaGuardia and Brandon Fountain, who are two poles, big body bruisers that, are very tactical guys. I think, I'm sure, Tice is probably thinking about, similar things that PJ and I are talking about, but I think those two guys match up well with a Busey and a Laird, and, their midfield defense is going to be the big key here is, can their LSM, like PJ said, limit Eric to 3 points? Cause like you said, you can't, they're going to get theirs. Like, and that's the stuff I tell my guys all the time is I think they just have it ingrained in their head that like, they have to just stop these guys from getting points, and that's just not going to happen. And so, like, you just have to limit them to the best you can. And, like we had that experience on Friday with Dylan Finder. It's like, I told, Andrew Nickelmeyer last time, I said, just keep him contained, man. Like, just keep him contained and limit him. And he did a great job. And so I think it's the same message to Perry is like, you just got to limit those guys. You can't let them pop off for 5-6 goals a game.
Yeah. It's kind of like that basketball mindset almost, right? Like you're not gonna stop LeBron James every time, right? But you gotta, if you can slow him down, then you're gonna be in a better spot. And so all right, so let's transition away from that offensive defensive matchup. Oh, you got something there, PJ?
Yeah, I was going to say, Brian, if you look at what they did last game, and they, Cody put together a hell of a game plan. They held him to 9 goals. Like if you can hold Brophy to 8 to 10 goals, you're doing your job on the defensive end. Now the offense got to do their part, and that comes down to Dylan Finder, really pushing. I would find ways to push transition with Dylan. I think if you settle the 6-on-6 in Brophy, their poles are so stacked. Harrison's obviously a horse of a DM, and so you got to try to beat him, and you got to try to get opportunities in transition, and They just gotta match. So I think they did a great whatever they did last time, holding Brophy to 9 goals. Like you hold a team like that to under 10, you got a shot to win, but you got a responsibility to put the ball in the back of the net.
Yeah. And I'm gonna get to that Perry offense because I want to talk about that piece too. I want to just really quickly jump back to the face-off X. This is such a huge piece. I talk about it in the broadcast all the time that as a team, when you've got a guy who can win the face-off, as a defense, it makes you feel better because if you give one up, you thinking, okay, I've got a chance that they're going to get on offense. I get a break here. And if you're on offense, it makes you feel better because you're like, we can make it, take it, and get on a run here. You talked a little bit about it before, PJ. We've got a good matchup here with Dion, who, I think I don't think you could really argue it, especially this season, has been the top face-off guy in the state. I think some people have played well against him, but I don't think anyone's really compared in terms of numbers and just the impact on the game. You talked about trying to get him to push the faceoff back to himself, and maybe some other things. Are you doing anything exotic right away? Are you bringing 2 poles up right away? Or are you keeping that in your back pocket if things go bad? What are you guys thinking strategy-wise in that face-off? Are you just going to drop your wings in a fast break position and just try to think, okay, at the end of the day, we're just going to not give up fast break. I don't care where they go. We're just going to go. We're going to pull our guys back on the wing. What's your thoughts going into the face-off matchup?
Yeah, I think for us, like you mentioned, I think Dion has pretty much dominated the league all year. I think one guy that he mentioned that gave him the toughest time was Jordan, and so something that we did was kind of a combination of things. Like you said, we would drop the pole and have him cut the fast break and really force Dion to make a play, or we would lock the wings and really make it a 50-50 if we could with Jordan, and trusting Jordan to do that, or one guy on the wing is locking, one guy's not. So we definitely tried to throw a mix of things at him, and Jordan did a great job of trying to counter in multiple different ways. So yeah, I would say it's got to be a mix. I think if you just settle for putting the pole to stop the fast break, I think Dion's a good enough face-up guy where he can just pop that back to Harrison, and Harrison's just going to have himself a ground ball night. So you kind of have to mix it up a little bit and force Dion's hand. And then it's the same thing. If you decide you're going to lock the wings the whole game, you're playing with fire there with him hitting the fast break a lot of the time.
Yeah, man, I agree with him. And Dustin had a great Fogo in Jordan, and so it kind of depends on Perry's personnel. They do have a scrappy Fogo. He's tough.
Yeah, Shane, right?
Yeah. Right off the bat, I'm probably talking to him about, hey, listen, if you want to go maybe 1 or 2 and try to beat him, give it a shot. But then you need to adjust, right? And you need to learn. You got to counter quick. And then if he's struggling with counters, you want to try to make, at best, you want to make it a 50-50 ball, right?
Yeah.
Make it
yeah.
And if he's struggling there, then depending on what you can do with the long stick, Corona had the benefactor of Tanner Myrick, who knows how to face off. And I think he won 30 face offs. And so he knows how to counter with a long pole and then turn it into a dogfight. So I'm probably finding ways to do that. At the very least, if Dion's, he's high IQ, he's incredibly talented. So, you just got to make sure that if he's going to beat you, beat him back, get him to 6-on-6. Because again, I want to do everything to prevent Brophy from transition opportunities, even if that means giving up some of the face-offs. And so when you go to double poles, again, it's another personnel matchup. So, can your defensive midi handle transition defense, right? Do they understand it? Can they handle a fast break rotation? And if you're going to pull 2 poles up, do those poles? Can those poles handle a ground ball? Because if you just throw 2 poles on a face-off and they're not strong at ground balls, where you're just going to get smoked. And so you have to understand the personnel that you have. If you have 2 talented poles that can handle ground balls, then you put your best D-midi ground ball guy, or best midfielder ground ball guy on there. Then you can do that. So it always depends on your personnel. But at the end of the day, you need to find ways to make sure Dion doesn't hurt you in transition, even if that means maybe losing that ball. But at best, you're looking to make it a 50-50 ball with your best ground ball guys on the wings at all times.
Yeah, and I think when you're playing good face-off guys, whoever the team is, you got to make it a wing battle. It's a team effort, and even if guys win the face-off clean, we always used to talk about still staying on it, and do they win the face-off, but then you can kind of cause a turnover right away. And I think that wing play and that face-off unit is going to be so important. And that's awesome. So let's shift gears in the sake of time here. I want to make sure, and we got to give respect for this Perry offense here. So as well as really the Brophy defense. So we know the Brophy defense has been very successful. They're probably the biggest defense in the league. They've got some size on there. You've got Connor Rassis. Noah Burdick, ironically not the one of the size, but probably maybe arguably the best out of them, as well as Charlie McGinnis, another big guy, and Todd Baldega, as well as some other guys there too. So you're going against this. If you're Perry, you're going against this big Brophy defense. You've got some good players on the Perry offensive side. Dylan Finder, we've talked about. He's a talented midfielder, can dodge and shoot off the run. I think one of the best in the league at doing that. Jace White, who I think has been hurt for a lot of the season, but in the games he's played made a big impact, and some other players for Perry. So if you're Perry offense, let's say, and now you get the ball again, and I'm taking it from their standpoint because they're the underdog. So from an X's and O's, their game plan maybe a bit more. How are you attacking the Brophy defense? Where do you think is the strategy on that?
You want me to go, Dustin, or you want to go?
Yeah, you can go for that one first.
Yeah, so I think that's. I love, first off, I love the chess game. Right, this is fun. Coaching, and especially going up against a Brophy like just well-minded and enticed. So the biggest thing is, they have Brophy has a phenomenal defense. So I want to find ways to get transition against those guys, especially if I could find, Dylan in push and transition. That's a good opportunity there. Dylan Finder, like you said, Bryan, he's probably the best in the league at being able to just, make a move, and release the shot with such speed. Just he's unbelievable. Change direction, he does it all. So if we can get him transition opportunities, that's a good thing. That means that he might have to play a little bit of defense, right? And then, looking to get the ball out quick off a save, because they are very sound in 6-on-6. And then you have Harrison, who's a beast of a defensive midi. So it's not like you could just attack him thinking, you're going to get opportunities. So if you look at Perry's strengths, Dylan Finder, obviously he can do it all. He's gonna draw an early slide most likely. And those guys are going to be licking their chops on him. And so if I'm Tice, I'm trying to find ways to put him in positions where I can either get him the ball off the backside, off a dodge, where he's isolated on a one-on-one, maybe like on the wing. So maybe fading him to the backside and letting other people dodge and try to get him matchups where there's long slides. That's one way I'm trying to find opportunities for him. And then you got Jace, who's probably one of the best finishers in the league with some time and room. Very good step down shooter, like quick release. So, maybe going some big little at X and getting your hands free at GLE and trying to get Jace a quick one. I'm looking for opportunities there most likely, right? And so you got to think about dodging from areas of the field that are maybe a little more untraditional, because if you stick to kind of traditional motions on Brophy's defense, they're too experienced. I mean, hell, you kind of have a college caliber defense there.
Yeah, they're good. They're good, man, and they're big.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I like that. Dustin, before I go to you, PJ, you talked about playing like a big little game behind. For people who may not really understand that invert concept and that two-man game, can you expand on that a little bit and sort of what you're trying to do?
Yeah. So with the big little concept, what you're trying to do, when you say big little, it means, you got a player with a long pole defenseman on you, and and little meaning you have a player with a short stick on you. So you're looking for, and you're seeing that a lot in the college game too. And the reason why you see that in the college game is because D middies nowadays they're not like the unathletic players. They're savages. And so where before you could just take guys, you could beat them in the midfield and run your offense, but now everybody's an athlete. So you have to find ways to create opportunities in tight spaces. And so if you're looking to get some of your better players off a pole, it's similar to basketball. It's you're setting a pick game with a short stick D midi and hoping they switch, or even another scenario is they double. So a lot of times, if you go kind of the low corners. You go to GLE, sometimes D middies aren't as experienced playing defense back there, so it's usually a favorable place to start to play the 2-man game. But the big little is, you're trying to get a defenseman with a long pole and a short stick, and you're playing a pick and roll type game to create opportunities. And there's a few scenarios you can capitalize off that pick game, not to get too in depth, but essentially that's what you're trying to do, is get them in areas where you can get some mismatches.
Yeah, there you go. That helps. And Dustin, are you thinking the same thing? Anything different you're thinking about attacking that Brophy defense?
Yeah, no, I'm very similar to what PJ was saying. I think that the other thing too is, Brophy loves to put a lot of pressure on you. They're not afraid to leave those guys on an island, and I think that's what kind of going back to the whole Brophy beating you in the parking lot is, I think they bring such a fear factor with the size and the physicality of their defense. Coach Tanner's not afraid to throw those guys on an island because they all have trust in each other and their skill set to be able to take their guy out. And so they're, it's making sure that you may have to run a little bit more, but getting open a little bit easier, a little bit faster, setting more picks and moving and making them uncomfortable. Because if you're just kind of swinging the ball around, trying to kill time, that's just not going to work with them. They're just going to put pressure on you and they'll be going the other way. So you gotta, like Coach PJ said, you gotta get Dylan behind the cage, get some picks for Jace, get those guys moving, get those poles like a Tob or a Charlie McGinnis, maybe up towards the midfield where they're not so used to playing and maybe out of their comfort zone, and get some of those guys out of position, just because if they're just sitting there waiting for you, they're going to pick you apart. So just finding ways to get them uncomfortable would be the biggest thing, and finding ways to do that is going to be the biggest thing for Perry, is just kind of mixing it up instead of just kind of swinging it around and trying to watch a couple guys dodge.
Yeah. And you said one thing there I thought was important too, is that pressure and what you do when you're getting pressure on you, because that is something that they're going to do, right? They're going to come out and play you, and teams, I think, try to just back up more and like sort of they don't necessarily have they play into it by getting too passive with it. And to your point, you've got to be aggressive. You've got to move your feet more. You've got to run more. You've got to set picks on ball, off ball. You've got to V-cut to get open. If you're the off-ball guy, you've got to press into your guy and get open. You can't make it easy for teams. I think that's something that's really important too. They do like to be active. They've got a ton of size and length that gives them the ability to do that. They're good athletes back there. So that's a big piece too. Now I do want to, I know we got another matchup to get to, and I want to get to that next. I have one other kind of X's and O's matchup I want to get your take on too, because I actually see this happening a lot more in the college game now too, and I know it's something Brophy's done well. Desert Vista's done it, I think, in the past a little bit, I think, when you were there, PJ, and that's the 10-man ride. We know Brophy rides really well, and sometimes they throw that 10-man ride at you. And again, for people listening, the idea is you're sort of pulling your goalie out of the cage to cover an attackman so that you can essentially bump everybody up one layer and put pressure on the clearing team to try and force a turnover. Brophy's done it a lot this year, I think more than they've done previously. And again, I think it's become a bit more common, it feels like, as a tool that teams are employing. So you're Perry, you're going to potentially get this 10-man ride thrown at you. What are you doing to kind of counter that? I don't know, PJ, let's start with you.
Yeah, I mean, I love the 10-man ride. We 10-man. It was excited to see Brophy do that, especially when you have, Petzmeyer, who's probably the best athlete in between the pipes in the state. So, you're confident in him outside the cage. So the key to when a 10-man ride's coming, there's kind of three critical ways that you can be prepared for it and beat it. As one is, don't let it develop, right? So it's quick clearing, quick outlets, and that should play to that concept of you need transition opportunities. So I'm probably taking a play out of Chad's book, and off a shot, we're sending somebody upfield and hoping to save. Aiden makes a save in the outlet. So you got to let them. You can't let them get into it. That's one. So you're looking to push transition quick off a save. The second one is like, the understanding the 10-man ride concept is there's always somebody that is at the midfield line. Otherwise, the riding team's offside. So, you have to shrink your clear down into your half of the field. And so it gets tight though, right? So you're talking about going, 7v6 inside a half field. And there's ways to do it, but if you do it, you're always going to have a guy open, and then it's making sure that you can beat a guy one-on-one to get up and out. And then the third thing is shoot it. I'm not a huge fan of that, especially refs nowadays. They're kind of they're looking more and more like, was it a shot? And if you're prepared for the shot,
it feels like colleges are doing that more as a counter to it. It feels like I've seen a lot more empty net goals, and that's again, like a counter strategy to it that they're employing more. I'm not sure I'm a fan of it either, but it does seem like it's becoming more common.
Yeah, to clarify that, like if I had a college staff, I'm like, hell yeah, shoot it out, because those guys can hit the cage from 60 yards away, right? We struggle in Arizona hitting the cage from 10 yards out. So
I mean, that's a good point, right? It's a skill level that maybe it's not a good strategy at this when you.
So what you're trying to do when you shoot out a 10-man, you're actually you're not trying to score. Because there's no rule on where the shot comes from. So if you're attempting to shoot, you can shoot from. I can shoot from my goal on your goal. And if it's an attempt to shoot, it's a shot. So what you're actually trying to do, you're not trying to score. You're just trying to make sure your guy beats the other guy to the end line. And so when a 10-man's coming, you can kind of scheme it where you get your defender or somebody with the ball towards maybe just outside your box. And then you just have your attack men kind of sitting at GLE chasing the shot. So you're not trying to score. You're actually just trying to possession shoot it and beat the guy to the end line, and then you win the ball back. So that's what you're trying to do when you shoot out a 10-man. But in college,
that's a good point. Yeah.
So those guys, if they hit the cage, or you're trying to pull the goalie. You want the goalie like in a place where he's got to run way back. So like if we tell our attackmen, if you're ever in a 10-man and the goalie's on you, you can't just sit there inside your box. You got to make him move, try to pull him to the midfield or way out to the alley, and that opens things up too.
Yeah, I like that. You want to pull him up high, and then maybe even within your strategy, you sort of know when you're going to take that shot attempt, and then you have a guy who's designated to run and just book it right away to the end line, and he should be able to beat his guy if he knows, number one, that's maybe the spot that you're shooting from, or just the timing of it or a call or something. If he can break early, to your point, you're shooting for the empty net, but if you're missing it, it's still a shot, it's still close to the end line. If you time it right, you can kind of get the ball there. So, Dustin, any quick thoughts on 10-man before we jump to our other game? I know we've been talking about this for a while, and I probably talk for another half hour about the other one. I do have my New York Rangers coming on soon, and they are going for the sweep against the Washington Capitals, so I want to make sure I can pay attention to that. But yeah, any other thoughts, 10-man ride, Dustin?
No, I'm good.
All right, perfect. So let's jump into our other matchup, which, arguably just because of the way the seasons have gone and the closer matchup, this is, we did get 1 through 4 in terms of the final seedings. So we do have the Pinnacle Pioneers, after a little bit of craziness with their games and weather delays on Friday night and having to finish Saturday. They end up getting the win over Desert Vista, a tough Desert Vista team. They end up beating them for the third time in the season, 1-goal game. It's really tough to beat teams 3 times in a row in the same season. So we know that was a challenge. They get it done, and now they're going to face Notre Dame Prep, the number 2 team in the semifinals here. Now, Notre Dame has been pretty dominant in state as well. Their only 2 losses were to Brophy. So they're going to be, kind of thinking about that. Whereas Pinnacle, kind of the story of 2 halves of the season. They started out 1-4 in their season, and then they ended up going, let me see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1-6. 6-1 in basically the second half of the season after that start. So big matchup. Really good defense for the Pinnacle Pioneers. I think that's where they found a lot of their success, although they've got some good, talented players on the offensive side as well. And Notre Dame, another team, again, they've been number 2 pretty much the whole season. They only lose 2 games to Brophy in state. Again, pretty talented team, top to bottom, with some good players at key positions. Both teams, good goalies. Let's break this one down. Let's start with the Pinnacle. Let's take the Notre Dame offense against the Pinnacle defense to start. Again, we know that Pinnacle defense has been strong. They've got some good long poles. They've got a really good goalie who's played really well this year. Let's see, Dustin, why don't we throw it to you first, since PJ hogged all the 10-man ride conversation there. So if you're Notre Dame prep, you've got some players like Dylan Reardon, Ethan Reno, who's been playing well. I do believe, and this will be a factor, I don't believe Cooper Perry is playing on the team anymore. I haven't seen his stats in the last couple games there. He was a big-time offensive player for them, obviously a talented football player, and I think he's pursuing that. But they've got a good team. And again, Dylan Reardon's got 54 points on the year, so he's pretty solid there. So you're the Notre Dame prep coach, Jordan Riggs. You're talking about how can we beat this Pinnacle defense that has played really well against some good offenses. What are you thinking going into this, Dustin?
Yeah, I think for Jordan, it's it's an experienced team. I think Pinnacle. I'm almost positive their entire starting roster, other than maybe 3 or 4 guys, are seniors. So it's an experienced group. It's guys that have played with with each other for a lot of years, and so I think obviously the first guy you got to think about is Nick Johnson, Nicky J. I think he's one of the best poles in the state, and so it's finding ways to attack, the rest of that defense and make Nick have to commit and make him have to slide. And, you're not, we talked about Brophy and, those guys are going to get their points. I think it's the same mindset for Nick Johnson. I think, he's going to get his takeaways. He's going to push transition. So you got to find ways to get around him and beat him. So I think if you're Jordan, you're running a lot of motion offense. Just from the years past of playing Pinnacle, I think it was something I saw success in was a lot of on ball, a lot of off ball picks, making them commit, making them slide, really looking for skip passes, catching them ball watching. So I think, like you mentioned, if Cooper's not playing, I think Dylan and guys like Ethan Reno and Gunnar Perry, Cooper's brother, I think, it's kind of some new faces to Notre Dame prep. So I think it's getting some of those guys involved and, jumping on Pinnacle early. Aiden's a great goalie, but I think it's a lot of motion, a lot of picks, which I think from what I've seen this season, it seems like they do that already. They're setting a lot of picks and they're seeing a lot of guys cut, a lot of backside movement. So I think it's jumping on Aiden early and just getting that Pinnacle defense moving and catching them out of position is how you're gonna beat that defense. The faceoffs are gonna be pretty 50-50. I think Caleb Casey and I think his name's Braden Lambert from Pinnacle. Those guys have been solid all year, but I think it's going to be, I think it'll be pretty 50-50 there. So it's going to come down to, I think it's going to come down to experience. Again, Pinnacle's got a very senior heavy team. So I think, and they're riding a good streak, but I think if you're Jordan, you gotta get those guys moving around.
Yeah, I like that. PJ, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, certainly. What's interesting is both these very similar offenses in terms of their motion. They kind of like those 2-3-1s with a lot of those weave dodges coming over the top on the wings. And so it's pretty interesting how that'll go, because I think Pinnacle has a very strong defense, good goalie. Obviously, Nicky J's, again, he's a stud. So if I'm Jordan, and he's a smart coach. He knows, like Dustin's saying, is you have to dodge. You always want to dodge with the intent to score, right? You don't want to dummy dodge. You dodge with the intent to score. And Reardon is that guy, 50-something points, but he's well ranked. So he's got, almost 20 assists. So
he's a good athlete. Yeah.
He's a very good athlete, right? So where you want to dodge, and then if you don't get the shot, you want to move it, right? So Pinnacle can they're very sound. Max is a student of the game. He's going to be prepared with his film and his scout. He's in the lab a lot. Respect him as a coach. Their defense is very aggressive. So like Dustin was saying, so when you have overly aggressive defenses, you got to be ready to move the ball if you don't have the shot, right? So I think finding ways to make sure you keep the ball alive. And, transition is going to be key for them to score. Because I think that's where you can get opportunities on Pinnacle's experienced defense is in transition. So, how do you set those shots up? Either coming off the dodge on knowing that they're going to be aggressive. And again, like Dustin was saying, I really think the key to this game, exciting matchup, is not just Caleb Casey and Braden Lambert at the X, but also the LSMs, right? Traylor and Johnson. So it's like that's going to be freaking fun to watch, man. Like those four guys going after each other. So it'll be interesting, and I think if one team had the night, that could be one of the differentiators. And then at the end of the day, it's going to be interesting because NDP's senior heavy. They're definitely got some momentum. They're playing great as of late. NDP's been there before, so it's interesting to see how they respond against a team that has that experience. And you got to understand right now at the end of the year, these kids, they're going to prom, they got their finals, it's the end of the year, so they got a lot of stress. So getting into the playoff games, you got to manage those things as a coach and be smart. And so, it's going to be interesting to how that goes. Is it going to be the experience in Notre Dame prep? And, making sure Pinnacle plays smart, plays poised. If they get rattled, you gotta be careful there. And Max has done a good job the last couple of games doing that, keeping them playing good lacrosse and out of the box. And so you don't want to be in the box against Notre Dame prep. They get some shooters there, so playing on 6 is going to be a key for both teams.
Yeah, it's a good point too, and they're an aggressive defense, and I've seen a few of their games, and they can they can end up in the penalty box with some of that play, and I think that's part of their not strategy but style of just being aggressive and going after teams defensively. And again, obviously it's worked. I think they're probably arguably I don't know the full sort of stats, but probably defensively the best team stat wise in terms of maybe goals against in the league. So. Probably Brophy overall, but I do, not to diminish that Brophy defense, but I do think a lot of that is also just that dominance of the offense, whereas I've seen games where Pinnacle's been on defense for a long time, and they can just continue to just sort of frustrate that offense there. Shifting to... Oh, yeah, you got anything else there?
No, I was saying, yeah, they just did that against, Desert Vista. I caught the day 2, and they had some really long strings of defense and just played super composed, weren't overly, and forced a lot of turnovers on the perimeter. And so
they're comfortable in that.
Yeah.
Quickly talking about the face-off X, we mentioned before the two players, and I do think that in watching at least the last game against Notre Dame, Caleb Casey was, I think, competitive against Dion, and I think he was out of gas by the second half of the game, but a good face-off player, and Pinnacle as well. Anything you guys are looking at specifically with the face-off X, or are you just kind of running your guys out there and doing whatever's sort of brought you here?
No, I mean, PJ said it, man. I think the popcorn popcorn matchup is going to be, those two guys, and then Nick Johnson and Jake Traylor on the wings. I think it's going to be, like you said, whoever has a better night, on the wings, and what Caleb and Braden are able to do, I think is really going to dictate that game. It'll be interesting to see, Caleb's, durability, which obviously he's been strong all year because, he plays offense, he plays defense, he takes face-off. So it's, it's going to be, and especially if, like we talked about, if Cooper's not there, it's, is Caleb going to have to fill in now for some offense more than he usually does? So I think his durability come the fourth quarter with 3 minutes left in a tie game, potentially it's going to be interesting to see how he holds up. It could come down to his durability for that game.
Yeah, for sure. So let's kick it then to the Pinnacle offense. If you're the Notre Dame defense and you are defending against this Pinnacle team here, obviously I think the really the three players that kind of jump out: Cam Conti, talented, shifty player, Nick Miller, who probably has. I was just looking at the final stats here. Probably the highest ratio of goals to assists. 29 goals on the year, only 2 assists. He's definitely the definition of a finisher or attackman in his ability to put the ball in the back of the net. Chase Mourier as well, a talented attackman for them, as well as the rest of their team there. And then on Notre Dame prep, I think the big name defensively, you mentioned Jacob Traylor, really, really talented LSM, as well as the rest of the unit back there. Luke Lamont, first year playing in goal, filling in the footsteps of Jim Hart, who was there for many years. So thinking of that matchup, PJ, let's jump to you. If you are Notre Dame prep, you're trying to slow down Pinnacle, or if you're Pinnacle trying to pierce through that Notre Dame defense, any thoughts game plan wise of what you're trying to do?
Yeah, they got some scorers, right? Conti's a very good midfielder, very well balanced at almost 20 and 20, right? Goals and assists. So, they love initiating with Conti on those long sweeps. And so one of the keys there is making sure, try to take top side away, get him to places where he has less opportunities to hurt you. And then with Nick Miller, sometimes the stat lines tell you, right, 29 and 2, or like you said, and so he's a scorer, right? So he's either going to score in transition, or if he gets the ball, he's looking to put it in the back of the net. So I'm probably looking to scheme to keep a defender on him. So he's an attackman, so he's probably on the perimeter and finding ways to change up my 2 slide, so my guy doesn't have to come off him. So you can kind of press on him and shadow him a little bit, but you still got to make sure you got backside protection, especially against a guy like Conti coming off a dodge. So those are the 2 things I'm looking at: is how can we keep Conti from beating you up and not just scoring but also distributing, get him to lower percentage areas, and then making sure you can find ways to find backside support while staying on Nick Miller.
Yeah, I like that, and you're probably telling your guys, kind of question both of you. When I'm playing an attackman like that, who's a shooter and knows to finish, I'm probably telling my defense to slide early to him. I'm trying to be prepared for that. Is that what you're telling your team? Like, go after him, force that double team, and maybe get some turnovers that way?
Go ahead, Dustin. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely the strategy. I had the privilege of playing Pinnacle twice last year, both regular season and playoffs, and I think that was the strategy with Nick is, and Cam and Chase as well. I've had the privilege of coaching all 3 of those guys at the club level, and so really understanding their game, and so just applying a lot of pressure, sliding early to guys like Cam and Nick who are going to really beat you on the dodge, get that first step. So it's putting them in an uncomfortable position, sliding early, maybe keeping a double a few times, but then Chase is very dangerous on the backside, in those skip lanes. So I would say if Jordan's looking to kind of put that defensive plan together, it's, finding ways to limit Nick's shots. Like we've talked about, his stat line is, PJ said he's pretty much automatic with the inside finishes if he's getting the stats like that, or his time and room. So it's making him uncomfortable, maybe putting the stick in his right hand more than his left, and maybe taking Cam to a different angle, and crashing the crease if Nick's there. They're looking there for Chase. So I think it's a combination of a lot of those things, but I mean, it's going to be a fun matchup. I'm assuming it'll be Traylor and Cam at the midfield. So,
that'll be a good one
they got
to watch.
Notre Dame's got another great pole in Tyler Wiggins, who I would assume is going to follow Nick around. So, it's going to be interesting. I think the thing I'm looking for is, it seems like this game we've talked about it more than the other game, but it comes down to experience. I think PJ talked about the experience of Notre Dame. I think, Luke Lamont, obviously I haven't seen him all year, but he seems like he's put together a hell of a first year at the varsity level. But it's, the bright lights of a semifinal game. If Pinnacle jumps on him a couple goals early, how does he respond? How is he in a close game? And so I think, with an offense like that, it's going to be up to Luke to, if they go down a couple goals, keep his composure and stay focused. Cause, like you said, he's been a big reason they've gotten there. So, it'll be interesting to see if it's a tight game throughout, if, it's a big semifinal game where his head's at throughout it all.
Yeah, that's a big point. He statistically had a good year for him. I wonder who worked with him before the season started. I don't know. Somebody might have.
That's an easy plug. That's an easy plug right there.
taught him a thing or two, but no, he's good. And I apologize for not having him. I know that Jordan has brought on a goalie coach on his staff, and I forget his name, but I know he's got the benefit of some goalie specific help there within the program that's been working with him. So he's in good hands there. And again, good. I think two really good coaching staffs as well. So I do think the chess matchups are going to be good to watch. The polls you mentioned, I think that's going to be a really good matchup as well. Tyler Wiggins, another one. I think he was hurt in the last game against Brophy, so you didn't get to see him play as much. So I think it's going to be a good game. I think there's a lot to kind of watch in terms of X's and O's there and strategy on things. But yeah, I'm excited. I think we've got a pretty good set of semifinals here. And what will segue into the finals. Obviously, we've been talking for about an hour, a little more than an hour, which is a while. I was thinking it was going to be less than that, but we've just kind of kept going. And I do think that, I hope the audience will really enjoy hearing a little bit more of this X's and O's side and some stuff from the coaching perspective. Any final thoughts on either of the match? I'm not going to ask you for predictions. You guys are coaches in the league. I'm not going to put you in a spot where you got to kind of give your thoughts on it. But any other final thoughts about any key things to watch or maybe X factors that we didn't mention in either of the matchups?
Go ahead, Dustin.
I think, they're going to be great games. Like we've kind of dissected them all. I think, just some last points for the two games, like the Brophy Perry game. I think we talked about it. It's, on the Perry side, it's going to come down to transition and Dylan and Jace, really setting the tone. They got some other guys on that team. We talked about some of the defensive guys, but they've got some studs on offense that I think can contribute. We know what Brophy's about, and I think if it becomes a tight game, I think it'll come down to some of that depth to really give them that boost. And then the second game, we talked about it. I think that's going to be a really good matchup. It's just going to come for me. I think that game is going to solely come down to experience, which team is able to handle the pressure in key moments.
Yeah, I like it. PJ, any final thoughts?
Yeah, so, it's going to be great games, both sides. And, for Perry, the most important thing, is teams lose the game in the park a lot against Brophy, right?
Yeah.
Just making sure you're mentally tough there and you're going to compete. And for Brophy, it's just keep doing what you're doing and not thinking through the semis. That can be a recipe for disaster. So,
that's a good point.
I think a lot of these games are top 6 inches, right? Or mindsets. And so for those two, that's for those two. And then on the other side of that, Notre Dame prep having the experience, knowing they've been there before, knowing what to do in the pressure situation. And for Perry, for Pinnacle, it's playing poise, playing aggressive, but playing poise and playing good lacrosse, and using your upperclassmen, your 12 seniors as leaders on that field. And so it's going to be great. And at the end, making sure, I tell our guys all the time, there's no such thing as luck. You're only prepared or unprepared. So making sure you're doing everything you can to execute and being okay with what you see in the mirror at the end of the game. If you do that, then all the athletes are in a good spot, and the way the chips fall are the way the chips fall.
All right. I love it. Wise words. And I appreciate both you guys joining us here. I hope everyone enjoyed this conversation. We're going to get this podcast out here on Sunday night as we're recording. I am going to watch my Rangers, currently up 1-0 right now over the Capitals. So I'm going to switch over to watching that game while we do some editing here. We'll get this episode out for everybody. So hope you enjoy it. Please, as always, give us feedback if you appreciate this conversation, things that we can talk about more. Dustin, PJ, congrats on the seasons that you guys have had. I'm looking forward to next year for both of you and the success that you can build upon. Thanks for joining us here on the AZ Lax Report, and good luck for next year. And hopefully we get to watch some good games here.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate you both.
Appreciate it, guys.
Thanks for listening to episode 8 of the AZ Lax Report. As always, we appreciate your feedback and sharing these episodes with friends, family, coaches, and teammates. Be sure to tune in next week as Bryan and I discuss the final playoff games and state championship. We will also be announcing our Bracket Challenge winner and giving credit to players that were given all state honors. Thanks again, and we'll see you next week.